When a campus killing turns into a stadium crusade, who's being memorialized? The man, the movement, or the message? I'll unpack the facts with Maya, who brings historical empathy, and Leo, our forensic skeptic. This matters for security, rhetoric, and American civic life. Tonight, the story of a killing on a campus, and a memorial that felt like both a church service and a campaign rally. The official account lands one way, the public experience another. Let's unpack both without losing the human center. Here are the verified facts. On September 10th, Charlie Kirk, age 31, was shot and killed while speaking at Utah Valley University. Police arrested Tyler Robinson, age 22, and charged him with aggravated murder and related offenses. 11 days later, tens of thousands gathered at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona, a venue chosen for size, air conditioning, and proximity to Turning Point USA's Phoenix base. Crowds lined up before dawn. One local report said lines stretched over a mile. Attendees wore "I am Charlie Kirk" shirts, MAGA hats, carried flags. Traffic was jammed. Parking was scarce. Organizers prepared for scale and risk. Security was tight. No bags, TSA-style screening, a temporary flight restriction, glass protection for some dignitaries. Officials described SEAR Level 1 significance. Federal authorities said they saw no evidence of a credible plot despite monitoring threats.
Already you hear the duality. A memorial is high-security theater in a climate of online threats, and yet officials say no verified plot. That tension is the air we breathe now, fear as background noise, spectacle as solace.
Or it's responsible planning. You get tens of thousands grieving a national figure, you plan for the worst. It is tragic we need glass for speakers, but that's where we are because someone brought a gun to a campus.
The program mixed politics and prayer. Speakers included President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, Erica Kirk, and a long roster of conservative figures: Marco Rubio, Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Stephen Miller, and others. Erica Kirk offered a faith-centered tribute. She described seeing her husband's body, the wound that ended his life, and said she saw the faintest smile, calling it a mercy. She publicly forgave the accused, quoting, "Father, forgive them." Ovation followed.
Her forgiveness was staggering. That is grace under unbearable pressure. But forgiveness does not erase the questions about rhetoric, escalation, or the way power gathers around grief to push an agenda.
It also shows the movement at its best: mercy, resolve, faith. People in that stadium were crying and praying, not looking for a fight. That matters when we're judging the tone of the event.
President Trump called the nation in grief, and the killing heinous, framing Kirk as a patriot whose name would live forever. He sat behind protective glass and was photographed greeting Elon Musk, a public reconciliation after months of tension.
A clip from that day had Trump saying, "Celebrate the life of a great man, a time of healing." He also riffed about campuses, how 10 years ago they were dangerous for conservatives and now they're hot. Say what you want, that's a real shift.
And that's part of the discomfort. A memorial becoming a platform to claim the cultural tide turned, faith as fuel for political victory. Some observers said it felt more like a rally than a remembrance. They weren't wrong to notice.
Vice President Vance cast Kirk as a martyr. "For Charlie, we will never cower, even when staring down the barrel of a gun." Hegseth, "A warrior for country, a warrior for Christ." Stephen Miller, "You have made him immortal."
Language like martyr is how people in grief say, "We will not be silenced." It is also how movements steel themselves. That motivates volunteers and donors, yes, but it also tells kids, keep speaking on your campus.
It can also sanctify the fight. When politics is framed as spiritual warfare, compromise becomes betrayal. That raises the temperature, and sometimes people get burned, literally, as we saw at UVU.
Turning Point USA announced Erica Kirk as new CEO and board chair. Hillsdale College plans a posthumous honorary degree. A friend who witnessed the shooting, Frank Turek, said he believes Kirk felt no pain and died instantly.
The institution moved quickly, leadership handed to a widow in public, honors queued up. That's a story about continuity, but also about consolidating power in a moment when scrutiny is hardest to sustain.
Or it's a wife stepping up because a mission they built together now rests on her shoulders. Plenty of attendees said she's the right person to carry the torch. You could feel that resolve in their voices.
Let's bring in public testimonies. Fox's Ainsley Earhart aired what was called Kirk's last interview. Host Andrew K. Smith said there was initial hesitancy to invite him, but once politics were off the table, minds changed after hearing about entrepreneurship.
Smith's line stuck with me. Food is love, break bread, sit at a round table. He said people texted they were impressed, that they learned something new, that it changed opinions. That matters in a polarized age.
Important context, he's still a political entrepreneur. Taking politics off the table is a choice about optics. The platform, the donor base, the influence remain. I'm glad mine's softened, but I won't pretend the stakes vanished.
Smith also offered a tight timeline. He says Kirk walked off their stage around 11:21 in the morning. First reports of the shooting at UVU came about an hour later. That timeline contrasts the ordinary with the unthinkable in minutes.
And that is what shocked people. One moment you're asking about favorite quotes and Sabbath rest. The next, you're telling an audience someone they just watched is gone. That's whiplash none of us are built for.
Beyond the studio, rank-and-file voices echoed faith and fear. One supporter said they drove from Georgia for 27 hours, that they won't be the ones reacting with violence, but also that violence will come, and it will be hard not to bear our arms.
I heard a lot more about restraint than revenge. Another young man said, "Nobody deserves to be shot, and words can do so much. That's the America I want. Argue hard, no violence, let speech work it out."
But the violence will come line is the fog we're in. When people expect it, they normalize it. Leaders have a duty to lower the temperature, not sanctify the fight. That includes media on all sides. Cool?
Media cuts both ways. One attendee said the media portrays Kirk as a racist, and that the party preaching inclusivity shows more hatred. You may disagree, but that perception is widespread and feeds distrust.
Another dynamic surfaced. Some companies reportedly fired or disciplined employees who criticized Kirk after his death. That is chilling. Free speech gets squeezed both by mobs and by bosses watching brand risk.
And yet the movement's pitch to young people is the opposite. Speak boldly. A 6-year Turning Point member said Kirk gave him courage to run a campus chapter and stand up to cancel culture. That empowerment is real.
Let's pause and recap. Factually, a fatal shooting on campus, a massive, high-security memorial, religious and political framing, and a set of public testimonies showing both grace and grievance. Now, the contradictions and gaps. Venue capacity varied in coverage. More than 63,000 versus up to 73,000 for large events. Titles for speakers were sometimes inconsistent, like calling Pete Hegseth a Secretary of War or Defense. Labeling diverged widely.
Those aren't trivia. Sloppy labels and inflated numbers shape how power looks. Making the stage seem more official, the crowd more massive, it all nudges emotions and fundraising in a moment when skepticism is thin.
Or it's messy reporting in a whirlwind. I'm less worried about title mix-ups than whether the narrative treats conservatives fairly. When the story is more like a rally, it can sound like permission to sneer at the mourners.
Security assessments diverged too. Organizers stressed TSA-level screening and a SEAR Level 1 posture. Federal officials said they had no evidence of a credible plot while monitoring threats. Both can be true. It still breeds confusion.
And what about the campus? Was security at UVU calibrated to the real risk? We do not know the full picture yet, but I want answers on protocols, intel sharing, and why glass shields show up after the fact, for some but not others.
Let's not pretend you can bubble wrap an open campus. You can improve, sure, but a dedicated attacker puts everyone on their heels. The fix we do control is culture. No dehumanizing, no cheering violence. Due process for the accused.
Due process, yes. Also accountability for rhetoric that paints opponents as existential enemies. If you frame politics as good versus evil, you shouldn't be shocked when someone decides evil must be eliminated.
That indictment should be evenly applied. I've seen plenty of dehumanizing from progressive influencers too. An attendee contrasted vigils and prayer with riots elsewhere. You can argue the comparison, but the point is, restraint can be modeled.
Timeline wrinkles remain. Smith's account places a last interview in Salt Lake City late morning and the shooting at UVU near midday. The official narrative confirms the UVU shooting. The morning summit is additional context, not a conflict.
Context that humanizes him, Sabbath rest, the discipline to stop working 1 day a week even while building brands. He told that audience it protects families. That detail makes the violence harder to metabolize.
It also explains why so many felt they knew him, a founder talking with founders, not a cartoon. That's why strangers drove all night from Georgia or flew from Delaware and San Diego, to honor a person, not just a platform.
And yet this is the systemic piece when grief gathers in a stadium with Christian rock bands and politicians on stage. The lines blur. The message becomes faith equals our politics equals faith. That is exclusionary by design.
Or it's honest. The Reverend Rob McCoy said politics was an on-ramp to Jesus for Charlie. If that made some uneasy, fine, but authenticity beats the performative mourning we see elsewhere. Let people grieve in their language.
We should also note claims about the final moments. Frank Turek said he learned Kirk felt no pain and died instantly. That comforts a community. It is not the same as a coroner's report. We hold space for both grief and verification.
Meanwhile, outside the stadium, people lost jobs for criticisms. Inside, Stephen Miller said, "You made him immortal." Both are pressures on speech. Punish dissent, deify loyalty. Neither helps us tell the truth about risk and responsibility.
There's also the immigrant voice we heard, a man who fled communism saying California feels familiar in bad ways. You can disagree with his policy rid, but that is a lived experience that animates conservative activism compassionately.
And that compassion should extend to those who fear theocratic politics. When a memorial sounds like a revival and a rally, some Americans hear, "You do not belong." We have to grapple with that exclusion without trivializing their grief.
Fair, but I also heard an ethos of invitation. Break bread, talk entrepreneurship, skip the politics for an hour, see the person. Andrew K. Smith said that's when minds changed. Maybe we need more of those tables and fewer timelines.
One more recap. We have a clear legal case underway against an accused shooter, a movement rallying in faith-infused grief, public voices calling for peace and caution, and unresolved questions about security, rhetoric, and corporate speech penalties.
So what now? We normalize rapid independent reviews after political violence, security audits that report to the public. We recommit to not firing people for unpopular views expressed without harassment. And we retire the holy war language.
And we stop smearing entire movements when one person commits evil. We insist on due process for Tyler Robinson, condemn every celebration of violence, and teach kids to argue bravely on campus without fear of mobs or HR memos.
We also ask leaders to call out their own side. As I argued earlier, if you bless the fight, expect fighters. Use your platform to humanize your opponents and defend their safety at your events. That's real courage.
I'll take that bargain if media and corporations do the same. Stop punishing grief you dislike. Stop caricaturing stadium mourners as fanatics. If we all step back, the temperature drops a few degrees.
Before we close, two discrepancies to keep in view. One, the varying capacity numbers at the stadium. Two, inconsistent titles in coverage. These are reminders to verify labels, headcounts, and claims before they harden into narrative.
And a third, the security paradox. Advertised as SEAR Level 1 while federal officials said no credible plot. Event planners may be right, feds may be right, but the public deserves clarity on what those labels actually mean.
At minimum, it means we take threats seriously. I can live with over-preparing if the trade-off is people hugging their kids at home after. Under-preparing is what we can't accept on campuses anymore.
In the coming weeks, the legal case will move. We will learn more about motive, methods, and possibly missed warning signs. We'll also see how Turning Point shifts, with Erica Kirk at the helm, and how donors and students respond.
We should watch for whether martyr language persists or softens, and if employment reprisals continue. Free speech cannot be contingent on whether you praise or criticize the dead. That is not a democracy standard.
We should also watch if campuses get more open to right-of-center speakers out of respect for what happened, or more hostile. I hope for the first, fear the second, and we'll keep telling students to show up anyway.
And we will keep listening to the people who made the trek, Georgia, Delaware, San Diego, Kentucky. Because public testimony, like Andrew K. Smith's experience, complicates caricatures more than any headline can.
The last word I'll borrow is Erica's: forgive. Not instead of justice, but alongside truth-telling and reform. If forgiveness is real, it should lower the heat, not baptize it.
And if resolve is real, it should build communities that argue hard and protect the weak. That's where faith and civics actually meet, not on a stage, but in how we treat each other after the lights go down.
Next time, we'll examine campus security protocols, the SEAR system, and where employers draw lines on employee speech during national tragedies. If you were at UVU or at the memorial, our lines are open. This is not the end of the story.